Have you ever wondered how auditors handle the huge number of small and medium-sized businesses out there? You know, the ones that are really the backbone of our economy? Well, today, we're diving into the playbook for auditing what's called a less complex entity, or an LCE. We're going to focus on that critical first step every auditor has to take, building the audit plan. So let's start with the big question. How do you audit a business without getting totally swamped by all the details? I mean, how do you zero in on what really matters when you're staring at a mountain of financial data? Well, that's exactly the problem that a solid, well-thought-out audit plan is designed to solve. Here's a great way to think about it. Planning an audit is a lot like drawing a map before you head out on a big road trip, right? It sets your destination, that's the audit opinion. It maps out your route, those are the specific procedures you're going to perform, and it tells you what you need for the journey, your team, and resources. Without that map, you're pretty much just driving blind. All right, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll talk about why planning is so important. Then we'll get into crafting the actual game plan. After that, we'll cover assembling the right team, figuring out what's truly material, and finally, making sure the whole journey is properly documented. Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, Why Planning Matters. And trust me, this is way more than just a box-ticking exercise. It's really about laying the foundation for a sharp, effective audit right from the get-go. The official standards really boil it down to two main goals. First, the audit has to be effective. And for a smaller business, that means being super efficient, focusing on what's necessary, not trying to audit every single thing. Second, you have to get materiality right from the very beginning. This helps the team avoid wasting tons of time on tiny little errors that don't really move the needle. And don't worry, we're going to dig into what materiality really means in just a bit. All right, moving on to Section 2. Crafting the game plan. This is where we go from the idea of a plan to a real, concrete strategy that defines the scope, the timing, and the whole direction of the audit. You know, building this strategy isn't just a random checklist. There's a real logic to it. The auditor starts by really understanding the business. You know, is it a corner store or a tech startup? That understanding helps define the scope. Then they look at the reporting deadlines, which sets the timing. And based on all that, they can finally figure out what kind of team and resources they'll need to actually get the job done right. And this quote right here, this is where the standards for less complex entities make a huge difference. See, for some massive global company, the audit plan could be this giant phone book-sized document. But for an LCE, the standards are clear that that's just total overkill. The plan could be a simple memo, maybe just a quick update to last year's file. The whole point is to keep it streamlined and efficient. And you have to remember, this plan isn't carved in stone. It's a living, breathing document. Audits are dynamic. As the team gets deeper into the business and uncovers new things, the plan gets updated and tweaked. It's a constant process, not a one-and-done task you finish on day one. All right, next up, Section 3, Assembling the Team. Because let's be honest, an audit is only ever as good as the people working on it. It's all about putting the right expertise on the job. Which naturally leads to a great question. What happens if the auditors aren't experts in, well, everything? What if they're auditing a winery and need to value the inventory, or a company with really complex financial instruments? What do they do then? Well, the solution is pretty straightforward. They bring in specialists. And auditors deal with two main types of experts. First, you have management's expert. This is someone the company hired, maybe a property appraiser. The auditor's job here is to really scrutinize and evaluate that expert's work. But then there's the auditor's expert. This is when the auditor needs their own specialist to help gather evidence. In that case, the auditor is fully in charge of managing them and their work. Okay, let's get into Section 4. This is a big one, a concept that is absolutely at the heart of auditing, the materiality benchmark. This is all about using professional judgment to figure out what truly matters. So what even is materiality? Well, the official definition talks about misstatements that could influence the decisions of people reading the financial statements. But let me put it in simpler terms. Is an error big enough that it would make someone, like a bank or an investor, change their mind about the company? That's the real question. It's a powerful idea, right? But it's not just a number that auditors pull out of thin air. It sounds a little subjective. So how do they actually apply this judgment in the real world? Well, it all starts with picking a benchmark. For a standard, profit-focused company, auditors often use profit before tax. That makes sense. But think about a small, owner-managed business. The owner's salary might make the profit look really small or even negative. So an auditor might instead use a benchmark like profit before remuneration and tax to get a more realistic picture of the business's actual performance. The key is picking a benchmark that reflects what the users of those financials actually care about. Now, here's where it gets really clever. Auditors don't just stop at that one number. They also set something called performance materiality, which is a lower number they use when they're doing their detailed testing. You can think of it like a safety buffer. It's there to lower the risk that a bunch of small, seemingly harmless errors could all add up and become one big material problem. And that brings us to our final section, documenting the journey. Because in the world of auditing, there's a golden rule, and it's pretty simple. If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. The documentation is the ultimate proof of a well-thought-out plan. So, when all is said and done, the audit file needs to tell a complete and logical story. It has to lay out the original plan, document any big changes that happened along the way, and record all those critical judgments, especially those key materiality numbers we talked about. The goal is that anyone could pick up that file down the road and understand exactly the what, the why, and the how of the entire planning process. So, our map is drawn, our team is assembled, our benchmarks are set, the plan is in place. But really, that just sets the stage for the next big question. With this plan in hand, how does an auditor actually go out into the wild and hunt for the real risks? Well, that's a story for another time.